So let's now talk about global variables. Now using global variables and linked values, we can create our drawings with intelligence. So we can just add more parametric features and more parametric capabilities in our drawing. Now to begin this, I'll go to Tools here, this Tools menu, and select Equations. Now this is where we can add our global variables. So select it, and now this equation, global variables and dimensions window will show up. Well, right now, as you can see, we have global variables, features, and equations as the three options, the default option. And if you go to this equation view, the sketch equation view, you'll see the sketch equation. And if you go to dimension view, you can see the global variable, features, and dimensions. So basically, these are different views of our global variables, features, dimensions, and equations. So I'll just go to this equation view so that we can see this thing well in this view. And now here, I'll start with this global variable. Now here I'm going to add a few variables and we will later use these variables in our drawing. So let's just call it length. All right. So that's our first variable. Now press tab key and this will take you to the value option. Now here you can select a function. If you want to just define it using any function, you can add any file property like mass, density, volume, and so on. And you can simply add a normal value. So in this case, we're just going to add a value like 10 unit for this global variable called length. Now press tab key and that's going to show you the proper evaluated value. Now if you want, you can also add a formula here. So for example, 10 plus 5 or maybe sine, cosine, or logarithmic value. So you can just add a formula just in case you want that. Now I'll go to the second one and I'll call it height or maybe width. All right. And I'll press the tab key and let's just make it 5. All right. And that's our second global variable. Let's add one more and I'll call it fillet. Tab key and let's just make it 1.6. And then we'll add one more. I'll call it depth and I'll make it 2 unit. And maybe finally just one more. I'll call it height. And I'll just make it 4 unit. All right. So we've got all of these global variables defined and we can now use these global variables with these fixed values in our drawing. Let's see how we can do that. So I'll click OK. And now I'll go to sketch option and select a plane. Let's make a rectangle. All right. And now I'll start adding dimensions. So smart dimension, and from here to here, we have the first one. Now, instead of adding simple dimension, I'll simply type equal here, equal sign, and that's going to show me all the options, including, well, global variables. So you can just add global variables, which we have already defined simply by selecting this option from here. You can also add functions or file properties, just like the same options which we saw when defining global variables. But in this case, I'll simply go to global variable and I'll specify length as the value here. Now click this green tick mark and this one too. And we now have a global variable defined. You can see this equation sign as well. This equation sign actually indicates that this value is defined using an equation. Now let's add one more variable here. So I'll just select this, and here I'll once again type equal sign, global variable, and let's call it width. All right, just click OK, and the width is also defined. Now let's exit out of this. And now I'm going to add a height. So I'll go to feature, extrude, and in this case too, I'll define this height using one of the predefined global variables. So for this height option, once again, I'm going to just type equal global variable and I'll just add height. All right, click OK, and the height is also defined. Now on top of this, I'm going to create another circle. So I'll go to sketch and I'll just create a circle right about here, and maybe let's just center it. So I'll just select this midpoint and I'll select this midpoint and I'll add the constraints. So this and this, let's add the midpoint constraint. All right. Now the radius of the circle. So I'll simply type D because I've already defined D short key for smart dimension. So I can use that. And here I'll use 2.4 and just click OK for the diameter. All right, I'm done. Now exit out of this. And here once again, I'm going to just define its depth using a global variable. So I'll go to extruded cut and equal sign here for the depth value, global variable, and here is the depth value. So just select depth and just click OK, and we are done. Now fillet, and I'll define fillet also using fillet value. So I'll just go to this one, the fillet parameter, the value option here equals global variable, and we have fillet. All right, just click OK, and now select the edges. So I'm going to select all of these edges for the fillet. All right, just click OK, and we are done. So now at the end of the day, this is what we have. And this drawing is made mostly with global variables. Now, if you want to change any setting inside this drawing, then you can do that directly using the global variables. And let's try that. So I'll go to Tools, Equations, and here you can now modify it right inside this. So here we once again have the global variable which we defined, but then inside equations, you can actually see all the new equations that are defined. And basically these equations are the dimensions that we already defined for this feature. So when you define it, SolidWorks will just add it as an equation. So we have used depth, here's the equation, and all the other equations for every other parameter that we have specified. Now here I'll just go to this value equation, and here I'm going to modify some of the parameters. For example, the fillet, it is 1.6. I'll make it 0.8 and tab key. Now this will change, and not only that, it will also change its finally evaluated value here. So this should in turn change the value here. But as you can see, the changes are not propagated automatically. That's because this automatic rebuild is not checked. You can click here to just transfer the changes, and here it is. Now it is transferred. If you want to do this automatically, just check this option. And now as soon as you make the changes, it will be transferred to the part or feature. Now the height is quite big. It's 4 unit. I'm going to change that too. So I'll make height 3 unit and tab key, and automatically it will change it here. So I've made these 2 changes, and with that I'll click OK. Now let's create one more feature. Actually, we'll create a completely new part, and on that part I'm going to just create several new features. So I'll just go to this rectangle option, and maybe I'll just create one here. Now in this case, I'm just going to make these 2 lines equal. So I'll just select both of these and I'll just make it equal so that we end up with a square. And now I'll define a global variable for only one of the sides. Now this one, I'll just make it width. So that should be 5 unit. And done. All right, so that is now defined. Now you also know that this width is 5, so the same width is used here. Now let's exit this feature here, and let's add a height. So I'll go to extruded boss base feature, and here we just want to add height here. But for this case, once again, I want this height to be exactly equal to this one. So once again, I'll use the same global variable for height. So equal global variable and the height. All right. So now that we have defined same global variable for 2 different features, it will help you keep the size consistent. If you just change it here, it's going to change everywhere in every single part. So now that we know the height as well as the width here is same for both of these features, let's try changing it. So we have width of 5 that I'm going to make 7. And now I'll press the tab key, and as you can see, it changed here. Similarly, if you change the height, for example, if you make it, let's say 3.2 or maybe just 2.2, then that's going to change the height for both of these features equally. So that's the idea behind defining these global variables.